I hope it's good. That's what they came to hear. Okay, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it. My name is David Kammel, and I work in the Biological Systems Engineering Department at the UW in Madison. My main function is extension, a little bit of research. I've been there about since 1985. Do mostly livestock housing, facilities, ventilation, many things like Kevin Yanni does in Minnesota, only with mostly dairy cows probably rather than poultry and swine. So I appreciate the invitation. I actually grew up in La Crosse, and I got some family relation in Mankato, so I know the area pretty well. The four-state dairy effort is actually a combination of Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, and we kind of center all our majority of our efforts in that Dubuque area. So basically in that driftless region of Wisconsin, where most of the farms in that part of the country are 50 cow dairies or 100 cow dairies in the hills of Wisconsin. The topic they asked me to talk a little bit about today was low-cost parlors. You can call them economical parlors, low-cost parlors, remodeled parlors, lots of different terms for that. But the idea is to try and take the next step for a lot of dairy herds that are in a position, as we see here. This is Wisconsin's kind of data. And I was trying to dig up Minnesota's. I know it's out there. I just haven't been able to update it because I've been asked to do this presentation in Pennsylvania and New York as well. And it just seems like there's a lot of farms in this particular situation. In Wisconsin, for example, and I think it would be very similar to Minnesota, probably just less herds. In Wisconsin right now, last year we had about 10,500 herds. We're losing about 500 herds a year currently in the last, say, 5 years. 10 years previous to that, we were probably losing 1,000 herds a year. When I started almost 30 years ago, there were 28,000 dairy herds in Wisconsin. Now there's 10,000 and probably just a little bit less. That looks very similar to Pennsylvania, New York, and Minnesota. You just got less herds. For a while there in Wisconsin, say 10 years ago, when efforts like the Minnesota Dairy Initiative is going on, the concern was, well, we're losing herds, but we're also losing cows. So the processors got a little nervous and said, we're going to build new facilities, but why would we build in a state that's losing cows? Because we need milk, and we're going to go where the milk is. And if that's Idaho or Washington or New Mexico or California, that's where we're going to put a plant. We're not going to build a cheese plant in Wisconsin if you're not going to have milk here. So the dairy industry as a whole kind of said, we better wake up and start figuring out how to deal with this. We know we're going to lose herds because there are some farms that are just going to retire and not milk cows. But the ones that stay are probably going to have to grow and take up those cows. So when we were starting to lose 2 or 3% of the cows, everybody got nervous. And the number of herds was going down, of course. The farms that I work with basically are in this range, under 100 cows. And when I look at those 100 cow herds or less, I usually think of a system that's probably a tie stall barn system, because Wisconsin is probably the furthest behind of all the 3 states as far as introducing parlors in the 70s and 80s, where New York and Pennsylvania put up little freestall barns and parlors. Wisconsin was still trying to use their tie stall barn. In fact, I guess when I started, dairy expansion was, I got 40 cows, I want to expand, I'm going to add 10 cows to the end of my tie stall barn. And then 5 years later, they added 20 cows to the end of the tie stall barn. And now we're at 80 cows or 100 cows, and they're probably still milking in a 60 stall barn, and they're switching cows because expansion isn't going to be adding stalls to the end of that stall barn. It's changing the system out, I think, at this point. There's not enough hours in the day or a good quality of life when you start milking more than 100 cows in a tie stall barn. Now, I guess I'll ask, how many here are milking more than 100 cows in a tie stall barn? You're not switching? Anybody switching cows? How many are switching today? 20 out of, and total of cows are? 50? Okay. So you got a 30 stall barn and you're switching 20. Okay. You're just at a different stage as some of these other guys. So, do you like switching cows? No. I don't know. Some people like that. I mean, it's I guess it's just one of these things, if you look at the industry, but as individual farms that I work with, these are the farms I'm working with. It's, they're milking way too many cows in that old system. And expansion, because maybe son or daughter wants to come back, I always look at generationally, farms almost more than double their herd size in their time dairying. Farms that started 30 years ago milking cows are now probably milking at least twice as many cows as when they started. And that's probably not going to change. Dairy herds continue to grow, businesses grow. So these herds in these old stall barns trying to get bigger, I just see the system is going to have to change. And it's usually, again, kind of a common story. Mom and dad are 50s, son or daughter's coming out of college, they want a dairy, and they're going to have to add more cows to support another family, if that's going to be their business. And how are we going to do it we're not going to do it in that old stall barn. We're going to do something else. We got to be able to add more cows and be more labor efficient. So a lot of things kind of tied up into this idea of the parlor. Probably the common scenarios, and we're going to, Bill Lazarus is going to show you those scenarios today on the economic side, is very common. Let's add a new cow barn, put the cows in a nice, comfortable place, and make it easier to take care of the cows with feeding them with a TMR, handling manure with a skid steer, moving things with a skid steer instead of a wheelbarrow and a bucket and a pitchfork. So, things are going to change. The system's got to change out. But there are some things that we also have to change along with that. So the first step is maybe the barn. The next step might be, okay, I want to milk, either I'm switching cows in the stall barn, or I say, maybe there's an easier way to do this and save some time and labor too, and maybe the money spent there can improve our labor efficiency. So the idea of low-cost parlors or swing parlors or whatever is not new. This is actually James Way literature from 1955 when some of the first parlors were built, and you notice it's a highline system. And that's probably because, as equipment dealers, they were used to putting in highline systems in the tie stall barn. So why not just plumb the same kind of system in and out of a little parlor and let the cows come to you to milk them and stand up milking instead of bending over cows and dealing with, knees and back, whatever, at, 30 years later. So I also look at this picture here and say, well, that's probably why some farms said, yeah, we're not going to do that because, 2 or 2.5, maybe 3 foot pit. These old hip bangers or sawtooth designs, herringbone designs. That claw looks like it might as well have been a milk pail on a hose hanging on a cow or a surge bucket, such a big claw. But, that's probably why people started getting a bad taste in their mouth when they saw a design like that. We can do better. There's better ways to do it. There's more better designs out there to widen the parlor out and still milk in a system that was, originally designed as a highline system. So how do we remodel these old stall barns? In Wisconsin, here's what we got. I'm sure they look very familiar here. 2 rows of columns, king beams to support some kind of haymow floor, usually with a 2-story barn. Maybe one of the additions in the 70s or the 80s was a single-story addition on the end of that. That's going to help, maybe if we can use that space, maybe it's a little cleaner, less structural things that we have to mess around with. This is a barn that I worked with about 8 years ago now down in New Glarus. He's a brown Swiss breeder. Built a nice little freestall barn for 150 cows, and he puts 180 cows in it, just because he can. But he was switching milking in this barn, and this is 75 stalls. It was actually a 3-row tie stall barn, 11-foot ceilings. Really nice barn. His grandfather built this barn. This barn is never going to go away. Okay, it's going to be there forever. It's a monument. It's the family's history. But when you walked into this place in milking time, there's 4 guys running around with 12 units trying to milk 75 cows or 180 cows, and two barn switches or 2.5 barn switches. So lots of labor, all had to be there at that time. It happened that this guy had a really good milker and kind of herds person that decided, I want to dairy myself, so he left. Okay, now what do I do? I got to find somebody that can milk like he did, which is probably impossible because he did a really good job at it. Or I can think about this a bit differently and figure out how can maybe I can take that savings from a salary, FTE, and put it towards a parlor and pay for that parlor with that labor saved. So that was his plan. So here's what we put in. I wouldn't call this a low-cost parlor, but it's all relative. There are farms and situations where we want to spend about as much money as they're willing to walk away from in 5 years. That may not be very much money. The question is, can you get the job done for that amount of money or not? They're not going to walk away from this parlor in 5 years. This is their parlor for this farm, at least for the next generation, and now the son's graduating out of Platteville. He's going to be part of the operation down the road. He may put a robot on that freestyle barn someday or whatever, okay? But for now, this is the way they milk cows. Now, they went down, they got rid of that one employee. They have one person in the parlor. They have another person moving cows. Instead of 4 guys during milking time, they got 2 people. And they can milk their 180 cows in about 2.5 hours. And a little double eight. It's actually a little Bomatic parabone stall, you know, what I'd call an economical parlor stall. And you wouldn't know it, that it's in an old barn from certainly the outside or the inside. This is another grazer that put a parlor in for about $25,000. They built their own stall, basically out of chromed hydraulic cylinder rod seconds that came out of a plant in Wisconsin where was right next to, it was a steel supplier that would, in a hydraulic cylinder manufacturer, they'd ship out the seconds that had a nick in or something that couldn't go in a hydraulic cylinder. This steel supplier would get the stuff and then sell it out to farms at a couple cents a pound. When it was all done, it basically looked like a stainless steel parlor because it was all chromed and heavy steel. This is, maybe inch, but it's almost solid shaft or larger. So you got to think a little bit out of the box. You got to think, okay, what's possible? What could we do with this facility? What could we do with this barn? And I'll argue, compare that to what it would take to build it new. Okay, if it's the new parlor that you want, there's certainly no reason why you can't kind of start looking at what would be the new cost versus the remodel cost. And when we start spending too much money to remodel it because of whatever reasons, maybe it does make sense to build a new parlor. It's just we kind of keep ratcheting up that budget. The situation I usually see on the farm is they spend a big chunk of money on a freestyle barn, and to spend another big chunk of money on a parlor is just not in the financial realm of possibility at this point in time. They'd only have maybe 100 cows to pay for that parlor. And when you start spending too much, maybe you can't pay for it. So basically I think what we've tried to do in Wisconsin and in Minnesota, we've had this meeting, something like this, 6-7 years ago, right? It's something that you might need to be educated a little bit, figure out what's possible, work with a dealer that's willing to help work with you to figure out what can we do with your system, your milking system, your claws, your vacuum lines, your pipeline in a different design, and plumb that system into a parlor. You certainly need some help from contractors, concrete, steel, welder, plumbing, electrical to kind of refit things. Situation in Wisconsin, there was some help from the electrical utilities to maybe help rewire the barn because you're gonna get energy efficient lighting put in, and you're gonna put fans in, and you might have to rewire the barn to deal with stray voltage. So this is the time to use some of those systems out there that we're helping you with. We had in dairy initiatives where we had dairy teams that would provide the Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection would provide, say, a $5,000 fee to help you pay for engineering services or financial services or whatever. So there are little pots of money all over that you could kind of use to help bring the cost down. You might need some engineering help. There are some structural changes sometimes we have to do with these barns that you need to make sure you get the right beam size so it doesn't fall on top of you. So here's where we're starting. This tie style barn probably looks very familiar. We usually had a silo room and silos on one side, a milk house on the other side or on the end of the barn, pipeline running around the barn. However many additions were in this barn, generally I see at least three additions on that tie style barn, from the 20 cow or 30 cow stall barn to the 1970s edition or the 1990s edition. until it got so long that they decided, that's enough of that. Maybe they got a manure handling system, a reception pit, and a pump to some storage. When I look at that barn as an engineer, I see alleys, okay? I see 3 alleys. I have an alley between this wall and this set of columns. I have another alley between this set of columns and this set of columns, and I have another alley here. I don't see anything inside except those columns, and no concrete, no stalls. It's just clean space, okay? That's the way I start looking at it. We have to think about where the parlor would go within that footprint, okay? If I can, I'm going to probably try and get the parlor as close as I can to the milk house and keep the milking system compact and in this area only. And I'm going to probably have my holding area on this end. The other reason I'd probably look at this arrangement versus putting a parlor down here is I'd like to move manure away from the parlor through the holding area and use that manure reception pit that I already own. There's no reason to try and put the parlor on this end and then have to move manure through that space. I have no gutters. The gutters is the first thing that's gone, so I don't have to keep thinking in terms of gutter cleaner, moving manure. I'm going to move manure a different way. So when I look at the layouts that I can put in that parlor space, there's a variety of ways that I've done it, or farms have done it that I've learned from and suggested, or they suggested, this is a better way to do it. So in this case, if you think of those alleys, and this is a 32-foot wide barn or 34-foot wide barn. Each of these alleys is 10 or 11 to 12 foot wide, 10 to 12 foot wide. Basically a third, a third, a third. If you really if you measure these enough times like I have, that's kind of what you're going to find. So we've got 20 to 22 feet of space between either this wall and this set of columns that we can use, because I can get a little parabone stall with cow platform, 8-foot platforms for the cows, and 6-foot pit for the person in a 22-foot space. I don't need that full width. If I want a rapid exit, yeah, I'm going to need more width. But, find the appropriate stall that can work within the space that we have, is the way I look at it. I'm only going to try and move some columns in this space if I can help it, and just get this space cleared out, because I got columns right in the way in my pit. And I've had a few guys that said, that's okay, I'll work around the columns in the pit. And after they did it, it's like, that was really stupid, okay? Why am I, standing up milking and I got to work around a column that's in the wrong spot? Just move the columns out of the way. I'm trying to minimize how many you have to move, and that's part of the, figuring out your budget, is can I afford to move every one of these columns out of the barn? Well, if you start looking at what that cost might be compared to building a new post-frame shelf, maybe not, okay? I don't know. That's one of the questions you have to ask and find out what can be done. But in this case, I just offset the parlor. I don't move the columns in the holding area. Cows will walk around these posts. It's not the most convenient way to run a holding area, but it's not a big deal. It's just flat concrete now. Cows will walk around the columns. I might have to split my crowd gate a little bit to get that done if I had a crowd gate, which I generally suggest you should, but that's, again, up to the person managing the milking. The other option is moving the column, or basically if you think of these alleys, but I also think about from this feed curb to this feed curb is also right around 22 to 21 to 22 feet. You figure you got a 4 or 5 foot feed lane, that's 10 feet out of the 32, you still got 22 feet from feed curb to feed curb. So the cows, when I look at it and think of it, the cows are kind of standing where they stand now in the tie stall barn. They're just turned a little bit, and my center alley becomes my pit. The nice thing about this is I have to move columns a bit differently or support them differently. What I do is put my columns now out on that feed curb, out of the cow space. So I still only have to span maybe 22 feet with my beams that carry the columns, and open up the space, center the pit now, and then I can use my holding area as basically a long, narrow holding area between those columns. Just put a fence up along each of these column rows. Now I've got a long, narrow holding area, and if I got enough building length, I can put all my cows, my 60 cow group in that barn. I can still move my manure this way. I plumb my milking system in and out of the existing parlor, or existing milk house, and I try not to touch much in here. As soon as I start touching things in there, it costs me money. I might have to upgrade things, but if you want to do a major, milk house replacement, that's going to cost you a pile of money. So I'm just going to show you some pictures. I just went through, slides that I've worked with on farms that I've either visited, toured, or helped with the design and came back afterwards. This is a couple of brothers in their 50s. They built a nice 150 cow freestall barn because they were switching 150 cows in and out of their 60 stall barn, and they got tired of doing that and wanted to have a better life. So they spent some money to put the parlor in to reduce their time in the parlor. They put in a rapid exit parlor. They also wanted a breezeway design. So here's the milk house, and instead of going down steps, which they just said, I don't want to go down steps, okay, to get into the parlor. Fine, we got to figure out how to do that. One is you're going to have a breezeway entrance, which means you probably are not going to have a single return. You're going to have a double return to get that space opened up in the front end of the parlor. But instead of steps, they just ramped it. Okay, we just started with a nice slight ramp we had the length of barn to do it into the barn and then down into this space. And the parlor got pushed into the barn a little bit further, and then some of this became utility space or office space. So we just pushed the parlor into the barn a little bit. So when you walk in, you basically don't walk down steps to get into the parlor. You're just walking down a nice ramp. Okay. And then, they didn't, again, it's probably not a low-cost parlor. It was about $100,000 they spent here. But, they bought new steel side exit parlor. They used a lot of their own equipment. They had a 3-inch line already. They just replumbed it. They moved the receiver group into a little mini milk house, we'll call it, over here in a clean space. They still used a high line and swing equipment. They used their own, if you don't recognize those? Those are just tie stall barn takeoffs, right? The real, I can't remember what the model is, but it's a real takeoff that they used in the tie stall barn. So they had some of that technology. They just didn't want to have to buy it over again. The other option is, in some cases, maybe they add new cow space and parlor to the front end of the barn and use the old barn for the holding area. Either we don't have enough building length maybe in it, or they're just not convinced that that's the best use of that space, and they want new space. It's going to cost a little bit more, okay, to get that new building shell and stuff. But in this situation it worked. We could still use the existing milk house, so they didn't have to build new milk house in this case. It was just space to cover up the cow platforms and their parlor, the pit operator area. So in this case, they built a nice high one. They put a cathedral ceiling in it. They actually ramped up the holding area, so they actually did have a breezeway design again in this case, so they didn't have to walk into steps. I don't know why that's a big deal, but some farms just don't want to walk down steps into the pit anymore. When they think of a parlor, they think of pretty much probably parlors you walk into new now, because you can build a pit breezeway design into new facilities a lot easier because you got the ability to do it. We're not dealing with existing elevations that maybe it's not that convenient, or we got to do some other things to the building, but I don't think it's a big deal. You walk into the pit, you work, and you walk away, So this is another little one. This was actually an addition on the barn that had an L-shaped layout in the tie stall barn, because they didn't have enough barn length. They had the cows on the end of the barn. They had to add it to the side of the barn. So, you had this L shape with a curved, angle gutter, or a L-shaped gutter. So this became the holding area space. They also put in a breezeway design. So they actually dropped the milk house, or the parlor itself. The operator area is at this level. The cow level is still at this level, so they didn't really have to change the cow entry much, except they dropped the parlor down a little bit. And in this case, they put in low-line system. They basically found a used parlor that they tore out of one place and put into their new building shell. This is their holding area. So they actually widened out the holding area. They put in new beams. You'll notice, and I'll show you other pictures. They basically put in a beam up in the haymow floor, dropped in some bolts and a plate to carry this beam wherever there used to be a post. Now there's just a little saddle to carry that new structure. And then a little crowd gate that they could swing a cowbay crowd gate, where it's basically just a swing gate on a moving carriage to bring the cows up, and then dual returns. This is another one that, this barn was in, if you notice the roof, I don't know if anybody's checked on putting a new roof on a barn like this, but it's not insignificant money anymore, right? The barn just wasn't in a condition that they were willing to spend too much money on it. They'd actually done a new addition for the milk house to support the old barn, tie stall barn. It's a bank barn, some of the foundations falling in, rock walls, it's moving, timber frame, some of it's rotting away, the roofs need some help. What it would take to kind of refurbish that building. Basically, they started looking at that cost and said, we can build a new shell. So to be able to use the milk house, they decided to put a lean-to on the barn. Okay, so the parlor is just alongside the old barn as a lean-to structure. It's actually a separate structure from the barn. They didn't attach it to the old barn. They just built it right next to the barn. Because someday probably this barn will be gone. Okay, it's just going to get torn down. We had to spend a little bit more money, but he got some good, good contractors in the area that were willing to do the work. In this case, he had some Amish in the area that helped him out, so he could reduce the cost of labor, and put in his parlor, again, a breezeway design, pair of bone stall that he put in, dual exits. He had to kind of move the cows, had to bring the cows up in the holding area to the elevation that they were being milked in the lean-to parlor. This is actually a brand new parlor, a little post frame building. It's about 40 by 60, I guess. It does not have a holding area in it, in that building, because she's a grazer and she just started milking now, and she'll be milking in about 3 weeks. She's basically going to milk seasonally. She has $140,000 in this parlor. I just got the numbers from her yesterday, actually. No sweat equity, just good contractor she knew and were willing to work with her. She picked up used equipment over 3 to 5 years, bulk tank, milking system. She built the stall, had the stall built and welded on site. She did a really good job of managing the budget, okay? Not too many people can do that, but she did it. So, she just found the pieces and parts that would work. It's a swing 10. The stall itself is basically welded together on site, and she put in a swing system into that parlor. This is just a little picture. This is one of her steps, and instead of climbing up square steps, she climbs up semicircular steps because she thought it was cooler to do that. It's been in about 3 or 4 other parlors in Wisconsin. One of the first farms I showed you that built this stall out of chromed hydraulic cylinder rod did this, and now when farmers go visit his farm, they usually come back and put those steps in. For some reason, it just kind of dresses it up a little bit, and they're very functional, and they look cool. I've had a few situations where, when you start thinking about cow flow, cows are coming over from this direction for where the new freestall barn needed to go. So I'm actually a proponent. Let's put the freestall barn at the new dairy site, okay? Let's not tie it back to the old dairy site. Let's put it where it belongs, up in the new dairy site. And if we have to walk cows 100 feet or 400 feet or 800 feet, do it, okay? They will live, they can move, they got legs. Is it fun in days like today or yesterday? Probably no. I can't say it's fun, but, it's only a few days. And that's the future dairy, okay? So let's put that where it belongs, which means we had to walk cows down here. Now, it was going to be really complicated because this was a main traffic area for the farm entrance, feed truck entrance, fill-in silos. Why would I want to walk cows through that space when all the other stuff is going on in the farm? We needed to move the cows in to this area, but I didn't really want to put the parlor in this space because I still wanted to use the manure reception pit that they did have, a pump there that they could use. We just pumped it now. They pump it and collect it here, back to the storage. Milk houses here. They didn't need a big parlor. A 8x8 in this case would fit in this 32 feet width, now length of the parlor. So that's what they did. And they just built a little post frame building for the holding area. In fact, that didn't go on till, you know, probably 3 or 4 years after they started milking it here. It was just concrete yard out here. They just ran the cows in the open yard into the parlor, and eventually they put a roof over it to get rid of some of the issues with snow and ice that they had to deal with when they didn't have it, but it turned out well. The rest of the space then they actually used for sorting, cattle handling, those kinds of things, maternity. Structural changes. Mentioned basically beams. Now we got to remove some columns, and it depends again on the arrangement, but in this case we can keep this set of columns. We got to remove this set of columns because they're either right in the cow space or the operator area. So we just put some beams in, carry them from maybe a new set of columns here or the wall if it can handle that load to another set of the existing set of columns over here, and carry this beam and not carry this beam by just hanging it or supporting it everywhere there was a column. We can put the beam above the king beam. I call these king beams or longitudinal beams. I don't know what the best term is, but most people understand king beams in a two-story barn. We can put this cross beam above them and saddle it like we did, I showed before. Basically, in this case, they just cut the haymow floor out between the joists. The joists were 12-inch solid sawn oak, lumber, so they could get a 12-inch beam in there to carry the load. Most farms don't have much up there anymore anyway. Most of them don't have small squares, and at least that I see very often. They might have storage for large squares or round bales up there. And, on one hand, I'll say, do you need all that storage? Because if we do need to store a hay load up here, that beam's got to be a good size beam. If we don't store a lot of hay up there and it's not supporting the roof, then we don't need to store a big load up there. So it doesn't have to be that big to carry this beam and this floor. So we can drop them in pretty easy to do it. You can work from a nice deck to do that. In this case, they dropped them in between the joists, and they removed them all in this whole barn in this case to open up that holding area as well. But they're just saddled, basically the king beam supporting this saddle, which supports this long beam every 8 feet wherever the columns were. And it, you need an engineer to do that. In the parlor, depending on how much head clearance and how you want to finish it off, they decided, we don't want to have a ceiling at this level all over. We'll put it where it needs to be and wrap that king beam, but we'll bring the ceiling up to the joist level in this case. This is also just a manufactured stall. We can put the beam below if we have the head clearance. Basically just get it underneath the beam. In this case, they painted it nice blue to dress it up a little bit. This is a manufactured stall by a dealer that did the same thing. He had the head clearance to do it. Basically, the cow level is the same level as this. And if you look at it again, this is basically exactly where the feed curb was. They just used it put the columns in there to get that out of the cow space. And then, one side on the parlor is basically personal lane. The other side is actually the return lane. In some barns, two-story barns, maybe post frame, where they didn't have timber frames being supported by those columns, they're just supported on the outside wall. They could actually raise the whole floor. In this case, this is just a barn just like that. The ceiling used to be, it's kind of hard because it's right behind this pipe, but this is the ceiling level at before, and now this is the new ceiling level after, because they, again, wanted a breezeway design and dual returns. This is a swing 16, I think, manufactured the stall. The dealer built the stall. The family basically had sweat equity. They raised the roof on the barn, the ceiling on the barn into the mow floor, recycled some of the joists that they took out, removed the roof, moved it up about 4 feet or so. So here's the old haymow floor, here's the new ceiling in the parlor. And then in the holding area, they had to bring the cows up from, up 4 feet to get them up to that platform level in the parlor. So they just ramped up the holding area because they had the length. And you notice they actually basically matched the ceiling, because here was the old ceiling. They matched it from back here up to the new ceiling here. So milking, we're just going to kind of go through some of the details of what options people have done. And there's just a huge variety of ways to do this and try and look at how you're going to save money. You can build your stall. You can find a local dealer potentially that's built stalls that we've seen done in Wisconsin anyway. You can find an economical manufacturer's parabone stall. You can buy a used parlor. You can design, if you want, front exit, which is, in my mind, just a simpler design. So a parabone, cows stand at about 70 degrees. You milk between the rear legs. You bring them in a gate on the holding area, and they exit a front gate in the end of the parlor. If you want side exit, or some people would call it rapid exit, so once the cows are standing in their line, you move their yokes or a drop rail or something like that, and they walk out the side of the parlor and then to their return lanes. That takes more steel, it's more complicated. It's probably not something you're going to build yourself. You're going to probably find a manufacturer's stall that does that versus the simple parabone one that you can build is just a couple of gates on each end of the cow platform that keep the cows in or out, and sometimes not even a back gate. This little sketch design we put together in 1993. It actually was developed with a work group of grazers and several of us at the University at Madison in engineering to kind of document and show, okay, what do you need for dimensions if you're going to build your stall? There's some critical dimensions of where the pipes should be to make sure you don't get kicked, the cows don't leave the stall, they got enough space to stand comfortably, and those kinds of things, and how you're going to support it. So, and this kind of came from just a lot of those grazers going over to New Zealand or Australia and showing farms, you know, what do they have they have a milking shed in New Zealand or Australia. It's just a shed with a roof and a very simple stall, probably a very big parlor because they have to milk their cows pretty fast when they're on grass. So they're going to have swing 20s or whatever to get those cows milked in a reasonable time so they can get back out in pasture. We can take that same concept and bring it back and put it inside a building if we have to, because we got winter here in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Just a little layout for the space. You know, how much width do we need, how much length do we need, depending on the parlor size, how the gates are arranged. So this is a home-built stall. This chromed hydraulic cylinder rod seconds again used. The son was a welder, went to welding school, decided he didn't like that work, wanted to dairy with Dad, so Dad and him built their parlor and their cow barn between them. So very simple. I always call this a thin parlor because when I look at the lines of the steel, it looks thin. It doesn't look like a cow is going to be able to stay in that. But these are solid shafts. I mean, this is solid steel. It's not going to go anywhere, and the cow isn't going to bend it or break it. This is, again, a dealer-built stall, basically out a 2-inch pipe, galvanized, and painted it after the fact. This is actually a dry parlor. This farm has 60 cows in a little coverall building and sand free stalls. That's all he wanted. But he wanted to milk in a parlor because he really couldn't milk in a stall barn anymore. Basically, physically could not milk in the stall barn anymore. So in order to stay in the dairy business, he had to be able to stand up and milk. Instead of using water to clean up the parlor, he just sweeps, scoops up manure if it's dropped, and limes everything down. He has a little water in here to clean off units and a little sump pump to deal with that. But he didn't want to deal with a lot of water because he had to figure out where to deal with it on the farm, and it wasn't a convenient place to do it. He didn't have a system in place that was going to do that easily. So I've seen dry parlors used. This is a manufactured, used to be Waikato. Basically, it was a New Zealand stall, they would call it. Parabone, S-rail design. Basically just hanging from some kind of substructure above to keep the posts out of the way of the people. Swing 12. This is a farmer. It's kind of an interesting story. It's kind of, things change, and farmer basically had a son wanting to come back to dairy. So he said, Dad, I'm not going to dairy unless we can get a parlor. So Dad built a parlor. And about 2 months later, son decided, I don't like dairying, so I'm going to go do something else. So he went to school. And about 3 years after he got done with school, he said, Dad, I'd like to come back and dairy. Now, in the meantime, Mom and Dad had to milk 100 and some cows because they thought that's what they were going to need for that son coming back. They continued to do that. Came back, worked for a little while. 6 months later, he said, I really don't like dairy. I thought I did, but I really don't like dairy. So he went to go be a preacher. So he went to preacher school, and he did that for a few years, and he actually came back, and he's actually dairy farming with them right now. So things change. But the moral of the story was, when I've talked to farms that are thinking about, investing in the dairy because son or daughter says they're going to come back to the dairy, is figure out how you're going to tie them to the dairy for a little while, if that's what you want to do. I don't know that you want to do that, but they have to have a commitment because you might end up with it yourself, okay? And it wasn't such a bad thing for Mom and Dad because now they were standing up milking cows instead of in a tie stall barn, but it wasn't part of the original plan. So things can change, right? This is a Bomatics parabone stall. Put in that old Swiss barn that I showed you earlier. Very nice parlor. Again, this is not a walk-away, remodel, low-cost parlor. This is a parlor they're going to be in for a while. Some of the other ones, they put enough money in that they can walk away in 5 years. This is actually a Germania parlor that a guy bought used. Basically just restructured the barn a little bit and put a double six in this case. Side exit, drop rail, I guess this is raised rail design from Germania. This is that yoke design. De La Valle and several other manufacturers have this yoke design for a rapid exit. You're going to need that 32 feet. You can get a side exit parlor in. It's a little tight on the cow exit side because normally you'd like to have 40 feet of width. A 16-foot platform here instead of a 12-foot platform, but it can work. This is. It can work. It can work. Flow is going to be a little congested when you release all 8 cows or whatever here. What do cows do when they exit a parlor like this? Not everybody leaves. Not everybody leaves. Some like to hang around. And you got to have space for them to get out before you can bring this back down again because you don't want to drop that back on top of a cow that just isn't moving out of the way. Because that's going to delay your next load, So it can slow down a little bit just because you don't have enough space. This is, I think Albers makes this stall out of California. It's actually a little swing gate side exit stall. You can actually release an individual cow if you chose to in this design. But this is a farm. Son was in short course. I teach short course at Madison in the fall. In a livestock housing course, and came back to the farm, and Dad and him put up a 150 cow freestall barn because son was going to dairy, and they just didn't want to milk and switch in the stall barn anymore. So they spent about $25,000 just for new concrete in the stall, and then everything else was their own equipment, just recycled over. And I'll show you another picture in a bit. But this is just a $25,000 parlor. Now you notice it's not finished off or anything like that, and I'll get to that in a second. I always like this one because you got this was a guy who loved his shop, so he got diamond plate for his splash shield. It's always kind of fun. Creativity and just things that, pop out when you see them. That's kind of cool. You wanted a splash shield. Chop gates. So some parabone parlors, the New Zealand style, would not have a back gate. The back gate for a New Zealand style parlor parabone would be whatever cows are behind that last cow being milked. So when you open the front gate and you start letting those cows exit out the front, those first cow that hasn't been milked's got to be stopped somehow without trying to swing a gate up against her and she pushes through it, and it hits you or you get injured. So the chop gates, guillotine gates, are what you would typically put on that style parlor if you don't have a back gate. But some farms decide, I'm not going to try and build that. Although some farms have tried, and I've tried to get designs, but it's generally on the back of a napkin. They build one, it works, they build a second one, and then the napkin's gone, and nobody knows how to build the third one. So this guy just built his own design with a little that he could operate from the parlor. It's just kind of push-down gate, counterbalanced gate that he can push down and open up or shut. This would be a back gate that you would put in so that you don't have cows kind of up against the gate, swing gate, for example, that would have to back up in order for you to open the gate. This gate basically keeps that cow from getting too far forward, so you can open it up and load. Holding area space, again, this is just a long, narrow holding area. We just use the old columns, new pipe rail against the columns to create the fence. And they put in another one, basically just pipe rail. In this case, they use clamps to make the rails, to attach the rails to the old columns. Poured a little new concrete. They still had a little curb here, so you weren't hitting these columns when you were trying to skid steer clean the holding area. Very simple, economical crowd gate. This is 2-inch pipeline, extra pipeline, because now when you put a pipeline on a parlor, that's not a lot of pipeline left. There's a lot of pipeline left from the old stall barn. So we find other uses for it. This was their crowd gate. It's just hanging on a couple of high tensile wires, chain and link conduit for the curtain, and a bell, cowbell, appropriate. You just slide the curtain open, load the holding area, slide it back, and then they just have like your laundry loop pulley system just to pull the gate forward, and when you jerk it a little bit, the bell rings. Some will use electricity as a training tool, but generally after they use it for a little while, they just shut the electricity off and use the bell. You can buy economical crowd gates from Agrimatic. This is that cowboy crowd gate I mentioned. In this case, it's just a moving carriage with a swing gate on it, so you don't have to you don't want to put a $20,000 holding area crowd gate in this system when you're trying to save money. This is a much more economical crowd gate than that. Just runs on the rails along the pipe fence. This is just a double wide one with double gates that, again, just a moving carriage on that frame. Very simple. When you get the milking system, now there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. Where the milk line is located, I'll call it a high line, or some would call it a mid-high line, and then a low line. High lines usually equate to swing equipment, where you have 8 stalls on a side, you only have 8 units, and you milk with 8 units on this side, you swing them over to milk 8 cows on this side. Low line system, you have 16 units for 8 on a side, and each stall has its own milking unit. Receiver group location, in the milk house or in the parlor, and we'll talk about the differences there. The milking unit, storage and cleaning, where do you store and milk and clean your milking units when you're not milking, either in the milk house or in the parlor. And then technology like automatic takeoffs. You can reuse stall barn takeoffs. I've seen every tie stall barn takeoff that's been retrofitted into a parlor, and then the ropes or arm takeoffs depending on the style of parlor you're milking in. So you got the highline system, pipeline and vacuum line are up here out of the way, milking unit on this side, in this case they got jetters, they milk a cow on this side. While that's happening, you're prepping, you're getting these cows ready to milk, and when these units come off, you move them over to this and milk a cow on this side. And with good management and a little bit of organization, you can move back and forth. So when you talk to other people like Vance Hogan, a colleague of mine actually lives in Minnesota, but county agent in Crawford County, when you start looking at unit on time, these units are being very efficiently used because they're almost always on a cow. They're not just hanging there waiting for a cow. They're milking. Low line system now, depending when you do that, you're not going to probably get away with a 2-inch line anymore because now we got, say, 8 units on a pipeline, on a line, and that 2-inch line will never handle that many units. In a swing line, I can take a 2-inch pipeline, which is probably what's in your tie stall barn, and if I put enough slope on it, up to 2% slope, because it's not that long now, it's not 100 feet of pipeline that I got to do at 2%, right? Because what's your pipeline at the tie stall barn? It's probably 0.5%, mainly because you want to be able to walk under the pipeline on one end of the barn or the other, or reach the pipeline on one end of the barn or the other. So if you put enough slope on it, you can put a milking unit on each slope, and alternate down the line, and now you have 8 units in a line with 4 units on each slope, and that's adequate for that 2-inch line as far as milk flow. International standards have shown that to be fine. Milking units, in the receiver group, again, generally you're going to use, if you don't have to touch anything in the milk house, like I said, you're going to save some money. Maybe you got to upgrade the milking receiver group. A lot of old glass jars might not work very well because the trap maybe is too small for that much milk flowing into it. I talked to one guy yesterday. He was talking about a foaming problem, basically, because he's got such a high flow in. It's probably just coming in so fast that it's probably causing a little foaming problem on him. But he was using his old glass jar. It was just causing a little.
What was causing that then?
It was probably foaming is usually probably too much milk coming in too fast and hitting the jar sides or however it's coming in, just mashing the milk up and causing a foam, and then that foam will hit the sensors and.
Right, but how do you stop that? Just make a bigger line?
Change probably the receiver group size or how the milk is coming into the receiver group, the milk flow into the receiver. Yeah. It may require a different receiver group, an upgrade.
Because most glass jars like that one come in from the top, right?
Come in from the top, right? Where with stainless steel, you're probably coming in from the side.
And that will help with the foaming issue then?
Well, it's probably foam and just the capacity. These were pretty small because they're only milking 4 units into that glass jar. Now you got 8 units milking into that glass jar. So even though the pipeline can handle the flow, once it gets to that jar, it might be causing a problem. It's hard to know. This one actually they upgraded their receiver group because the old one was just not going to work, and they found some used. You can put the receiver group in the parlor. Once you do that, this becomes milk house space. Okay, so now you got to finish off the parlor like the milk house. The other reason you have to finish out the parlor is if you clean and place the milk units, and I'll show you that in a second. But milk receiver group. Whenever I design a parlor, I always want to make sure I've got space. Even if I'm going to have a high line and a receiver group in the milk house, there's no reason why we can't have a space available in the parlor design to be able to upgrade to a low line and a receiver group in the parlor. It just doesn't have to happen right now. It can happen later. That's an upgrade. So this is that one farm where they spent $25,000, basically concrete and stall. There's no units hanging in here, right? So what do? They take the units out of the milk house, they hang them, they milk the cows, they take the units back into the milk house and wash them. All they have hanging in here is the pipeline and the vacuum line, just like it was hanging around in the stall barn, okay? So what did that save them? They don't have to spend money on a CIP or jetters. They don't have to finish off the parlor right now, okay? Now, at this point in time, this is probably 10 years old. When I was involved with them, they've actually finished off the parlor. They put in CIP. They've put in a low line, okay? They did it over time. So it doesn't look the same, but they didn't have the money at the time to do that, okay? They did that as they could and as they, out of cash. This is this is actually a county agent in Wisconsin. He makes so much money that he can dairy farm on the side. So he has his 25 cows. He shows cows at the fairs. He's got every breed. He shows all the breeds. He had 25 cows in his tie stall barn. It would take him an hour to milk. Okay, he was getting to the point where he just physically was having a hard time getting up and down to milk cows in a stall barn. So this is the old maternity pen. We hand dug out the pit, put in a couple of simple rails, a little storage. You see the pipeline now, instead of going around the barn, just comes in to the parlor and back into the milk house. This is a swing 2-2. Okay, there's 4 cows on this side, 4 cows on this side, only 2 milking claws. He'll milk 2 cows on this side, move over to the next 2 cows, swing them over, milk 2 cows, and he milks a cow a minute. He milks in 30 minutes, the same 25 cows, and he can stand up doing it. Notice there's no, here's his manure handling system, okay. Cow poops, you pick it up and you lime it and put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and you walk away with half a 5-gallon bucket at the end of milking. So clean in place. This is another reason why you would have to finish off the parlor. As soon as you store the units in the parlor and wash them in the parlor, then this has to become milk house space, and it's going to cost you something to finish that space off. It doesn't have to happen right away. It just depends on your situation. Another clean in place. So where the jetters go, it just depends on the equipment and how it's designed and whose equipment it is, of where you're putting the cups, if there's space to do it or not. Takeoffs, you don't need takeoffs are nice, okay? But when you start looking at what they're going to cost you per unit to put in a takeoff, maybe that's not in the budget right now. So you either use what you got or you wait. And in this case, they didn't put them in right away. They just used it without takeoffs. Pipe, basically they have it set up so the units are on one side of the barn or the other. So they're never really hanging in this position in the way. They're either milking a cow on this side or that side. So it really isn't that cluttered as it looks like when they're just stored there. This is a slider. I call this a slider. It's basically just a rope a rope takeoff from a tie stall barn. This farmer kind of came up with his own little design. It's a little swivel and a piece of door track, and he said he was at Ace Hardware 20 times to kind of figure out what pieces and parts he needed. So he just played with it so that when he slides this from one side to the other and it kind of twists, it's facing him, at that cow stall on this side or that side, instead of having to turn around and look at the takeoff. Another slider, just a rope takeoff hanging on a piece of PVC pipe with a clamp, a hose clamp riding on just sliding along a steel pipe. There are manufacturers, swing arms that integrate the takeoff with the swing arm. Certainly things that you can upgrade to or buy if it's a newer parlor. It's just not something you're going to, if you don't need to or can't afford it at that time, probably going to be an upgrade. This is a farm that built that parlor themselves. The son actually designed this little half-moon device. It was basically just an arm with a couple of clamps to hold a rope takeoff, set up with a little spring and handle that you could pull on it, and it would hold. You see the little notches? Here's a notch here, here, and here. So it would hold the takeoff in the right position to milk a cow. He actually patented that and sold the patent to some other manufacturer. Drainage, we got to deal with water. This is basically a drain. Think of a 6-inch PVC pipe. You put a little chamfered wood strip on the top, screw it to the plastic. You put the pipe down in place. That wood strip becomes your screed level now. Okay, when you're laying your concrete, screeding out your concrete and finishing it off. When you're done, you unscrew the little wood strip and you cut the slot open, and now you got to drain the full length of the barn, sloped in the right direction to collect the manure on that end, instead of individual drains that you have to chase the manure patties to. You can just chase it to the wall and it's gone. In this case, the drainage is the same idea, just kind of outside the cow area. It's a single return, so this is clean space. This is his little water tank for his plate cooler water that he uses to wash down the parlor and plums water to the cows. Little drain channel with drains in the channel, but everything kind of gets to the channel and then consolidates up against the wall. Plastic line, all kinds of way to finish off the parlor. The corrugated plastic, the flat plastic, it looks like cardboard, but it's plastic on both sides. Nice finish to clean. This is a woman that I worked with that wanted a tiled parlor, so she just waited and found deals at Menards and found a variety of tiles at pennies on the dollar and did her own tiling work. This is that Swiss, I'll call it the Swiss parlor. We use plastic on the walls, but what he kept seeing, when I see, what do you see usually on these plastic walls on parlors down at this level? Pretty beat up, gets yellowed, gets scratched up, gets bashed in. He put stainless steel down here just because, he wanted to clean it and not have to think about, okay, well, what do we do to clean that up? So yeah, it cost him a little bit more, but we didn't need stainless steel everywhere. We just needed it down where the manure splash is going. And yeah, with a foamer, it cleans up really nice, really easy. Holding area curtains, basically roll up, just like you would on a curtain sidewall. Open up the full width of the parlor. The design, you know, we're trying to do the same design we would do in a new parlor if at all possible, is open up the parlor. Let the cows see where they're going. Have it nice and bright. Don't have little narrow dark doors that they got to